Welcome home. We are WNST, AM 1570, Taos of Baltimore. We are Baltimore positively elated that on Monday morning, or might even be late Sunday night, we will have results, baby. Like Justin Tucker used to say, give me some results here this week. We're going to be doing a Maryland Crab Cake Tour for the first time in season on the 16th at Beaumont. Kind of cooling it out here this week. I have a handful of the Lucky Sevens. It is our 27th anniversary. We are counting down my 27 favorite things to eat. Tastiness is the way to find that out. I might have had a pit beef sandwich from Chaps recently. You can go check that out. Give you some cookie recommendations. And if you hang through it through the week, you'll get my favorite things to eat, and they're a sure winner. So don't press your luck with me. It's all brought to you by the Maryland Lottery. Also, our 27th anniversary brought to you by Curio Wellness. Whew. The Orioles have not gotten us well, Luke Jones, but I know you have been spending hard time out in Louisville. You know what? I used to really feel sorry for you when I knew you as a young man and you quit your teaching gig to come do this wacky journalism thing. And we'd send you out to like Boggers at 4 a.m. and you come home at midnight, and there were 2-a-days and nighttime practices and like all this. Now, like, training camp doesn't wear you out the way maybe it once did 10 years ago. Am I right? Like, you're ready for football. You feel spry. There was no point during training camp where you felt like you had to put the pads on, right? Like this has been an easier August with the Orioles sucking and them not really playing real preseason football, right? Like I usually look at you around this time of year and say, man, Luke's worn out. We haven't even started yet,
Well, other than not being 26 or 27 anymore, like I was in those early years. Yeah, I mean, training camp's not nearly what it was. It's funny. Now I'm one of the older individuals, not old, but older individuals on the beat. And I tell these young kids just like, yeah, it used to be 2-a-days. You'd have 8:30 practice on the upper field at McDaniel, and then there'd be a special teams practice at like 2 in the afternoon, and it'd be hot. There'd be no shade, all of that. I'd come home and I'd just be dead. Now, I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, the monotony of training camp can still be there when you go 5 or 6 days in a row without an off day. But hey, no one wants to hear anyone who gets to watch football practice and ask questions and cover an NFL team. It's a good gig. It absolutely is, but it's definitely different. Now, I mean, training camp is definitely a lot different than it was 15 years ago, let alone 40 years ago or 50 years ago when guys had a 6 or 7 week training camp and a 6-game preseason. I mean, we've come a long, long way from those days. That's for sure.
Well, I'll give you an aha moment for me because you're wearing that Baltimore Positive shirt there that's made of some fiber that Kevin Plank invented with the, in Eastern Asia 30 years ago, whatever, that kind of happened on our watch. My dude Hennessy, who helped me build the whole company 30 years ago, when the team came and it was time to like pick out logos and shirts, and we wanted to have mic flags and look like, as good as like Jerry Coleman or like a professional outfit would look. And the black shirts, I would always be like, dude, they're going to look better in black. Some of our guys are a little bigger. They're going to look better in black. The logo looks better on a black background. And then we made black shirts, and whoever had to wear the black shirts out in, whether it was you, Casey Willett, Glenn, whoever it was, melted out there in August. So, I mean, I remember what that was all about. I remember the drinking from the hose, guys throwing up. That was McCrary's job. So, I mean, I go back to all of that, but it does feel like from a fan's perspective, and that's all I am at this point. I'm not a real media member. And I watch from the outside. It does feel like they've rested every player enough to not be getting beaten up. I look at the injury report this week and see like, the likely thing and the Ardarius, a couple here and there or whatever, but this was designed to get to Sunday night where they are. Good for them, even if it's unrecognizable to Joe Flacco at this point. It will be here next week. And I had to look up like, Who the Browns play this week? Oh, Cincinnati. Who's Pittsburgh playing? Jets. All right. So I'm like looking around at the other teams, and this is fun. I mean, this we're gonna have a lot to talk about on Monday morning, dude. So, what do you think we'll be talking about on Sunday night? This is our real preview for the game itself. I've talked to a half dozen Buffalo people already. You can hear it all here at WNST AM 1570. You can find it at Baltimore Positive. About their side of the story in being the victor and how Josh Allen's the MVP and how they voted for Lamar last year, but they voted for Josh Allen this past year. So this is, and everybody knows this is going to be sloppy. I mean, that's the one thing when I talk to John McClain or Clark Judge or any of Vic Carucci, these sage people are like, there have been no practice, there's been no games, nobody's tackled, nobody's hit anybody. I wouldn't bet on it.
Yeah, there's always that. I mean, everything you just went through in terms of what training camp has become, what the preseason has become, how more and more teams, I mean, even the teams that play their starters, they're playing so very little, right? Right, a series, maybe two, right? I mean that's what you
It's
see.
been an
But you,
institutional change, right? Literally.
but you
Yeah.
have so many not just starters, but even established backups for the Ravens. I mean, even guys like Tavius Robinson and Broderick Washington, who is technically a starter when you talk about their base defense, but by all intents and purposes, he's much more of a rotational guy behind Matabike and Travis Jones. But even those guys sat out the bulk of the preseason, so I'm fine with that. I'm certainly not someone who has endorsed playing your starters in the preseason, going back to what happened with J.K. Dobbins. Hard to believe that was 4 years ago at this point in time, but here we are 4 years later, and the Ravens don't play those starters. So you keep them out of harm's way, but there is a transition, a threshold, whatever you want to call it, that, all right, it's go time. I mean, there is no, for as much ramping up as they do starting really with OTAs, but certainly the first week or so of training camp, there is a ramp up where they don't wear pads the first few days and then they put on the pads. They don't tackle to the ground. And that's kind of been the way it's been for quite a long time, even taking away the preseason game element as far as how teams have handled that. But you get to a point where, all right, it's go time. A perfect example right now for the Ravens. I mean, Jair Alexander, he didn't practice the last 3 weeks of training camp in the preseason. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say that I don't have any concerns whatsoever about his knee. I mean, it's the reason why he was available in mid-June for $4 million, right? And I also would say, yes, be absolutely as smart and as careful and as cautious as you can be, but there's no ramp up when he gets out there on Sunday night. There's no ramp up there. Now, there's a ramp up, I guess, in the sense that he doesn't need to play every single snap. You can rotate a series off and on with him and Awuzie or however they want to do it, but you have to get out there and you're going to be on turf in Orchard Park and you're going to be hitting guys and they're going to be hitting you, right? I mean, and that applies for everyone. So there is a little bit of that element of unknown. And I think I said this to you in a recent conversation, but it's worth repeating. When you have two football teams who want to run the football, I mean, obviously the Ravens want to do that when you have Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson before you even get into Justice Hill or Keaton Mitchell. And then on the Buffalo side, you have James Cook, who is a couple weeks removed from getting a long-term contract after his hold in early in training camp, and Josh Allen, right? So there is that element of how do both of these defenses tackle? I mean, in general, if they were playing in week 8 or if they play again in January, we're asking that question when you're talking about this.
And by the way, that's not once or twice or 3 times. That's all night long,
sure,
like Ray Lewis would say, right?
sure.
Like you can tackle Derrick Henry 9 times, it's the 10th time. You can corral Lamar 3 times and sack him twice, but if he gets loose and runs 74 yards on your ass, on 3rd and 14, because you stopped them on first, they blow whistle, you got a penalty, they put you in a bad D&D, and he gets loose. That's the creepiest thing of this playing from the other side, and that's what's given McDermott and the entire defensive staff there the night sweats, which is we got 65 plays against Lamar. We need to get it right, at least 63, not 54, not 58, because it's not going to be good enough. Not against this team, not against Flowers. They have too many speed guys that can beat you. And I'm like, the Bengals that are going to go more over the top and beat, pass rush and big plays and like all of that. The Ravens thing really does set out of the running game, which is, run plays that are 28 yards, 30 gash run plays.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Ravens can do anything, right? I mean, Bateman became a vertical threat last year. I mean, we're going to see what DeAndre Hopkins look like, but again, the point that I was talking about, it applies for both these teams for 60 minutes. Of course, when you have dynamic dual threat quarterbacks, Hall of Fame caliber dual threat quarterbacks, right? But for me, like what I'm talking about is much more like the first quarter, right? You get out there and you're playing truly authentic, real football for the first time since for the Ravens when they were at the very same place last January. For the Bills, it was a week after that, right? When they lost in Kansas City.
And it's going to
So
sound the same. It's going to look the same. It's going to
yeah,
be
so
loud. All. If
and
I were
I mean,
betting on anything in this game, when do the Ravens get their first offensive line penalty? Does that happen in the first
and
quarter, the first series? Does that not happen to the third quarter? Does it happen 4 times, 6? Because that's the kind of thing that gets them off schedule, right? That's the kind of thing that
sure,
sometimes it makes them more dangerous, but it certainly makes their journey a whole lot more difficult when they're, first and 20. It just
yeah.
does.
Well, and look at how it's funny because I realized this, but it really started to settle in this week as we're really, with cuts being over. And now it's like, okay, looking at this Buffalo game, looking at the matchup, looking at what happened last January, looking at what happened back in week 4 last year when the Ravens just blew the doors off the Bills when they came into Baltimore. But it is wild when you think about the fact that this is the second straight year the Ravens are facing the team on week 1 on the road, opening night, not opening night for the NFL, but Sunday Night Football, the premier week 1 matchup. And it's the same team that ended their previous season. I mean, it's the second year in a row that's happened. I mean, it's pretty, I'd say that's very unusual for it to play out that way, but it's life in the AFC when you're talking about having one of the best teams and one of the very best quarterbacks in the NFL. But I think you go back and look at that game, and again, this kind of lends itself to what I was just saying. Josh Allen wasn't the one that hurt the Ravens in that January game, right? I mean, obviously the Ravens hurt themselves with 3 turnovers, so you can't have that. I mean, that's a non-starter, right? If you're going to win in Buffalo, you can't have a -3 turnover ratio. But the thing that Buffalo was able to do against the Ravens defense is they were able to run the football. Now, they didn't gash them. It wasn't these long chunk plays like Derrick Henry's apt to do, or Lamar Jackson breaks a tackle and gets out in the open field. But they were able to sustain drives, and that's how they held on in the second half. I mean, if you go and look at that game, I mean, in terms of yards per play, total yards, I mean, the Ravens averaged 7.3 yards per play. The Bills averaged 4.6, right? I mean, everything about the game still boiled down to the 3 turnovers and Mark Andrews with a drop in the final minute there. I mean, that's what the difference in the game was. So I think that's where you take heart and you have some confidence as a Ravens fan that the Ravens absolutely can go into Buffalo and win on Sunday night, but they've got to play a much cleaner version of football. And as you mentioned, pre-snap penalties. I mean, it wasn't necessarily false starts against Kansas City in week 1 last year, but remember, it was the Ronnie Stanley lining up in the backfield and like the weird illegal formation point of emphasis that the league had, which, by the way, completely went away after week 1. I mean, we see this every year. The league has some kind of week 1 point of emphasis, and then it just kind of fades
Baseball's
away.
been the same way too.
It's
When
strange. I mean, it's just
when they
strange.
want to enforce a
Yeah.
balk rule the first week or
Yeah.
something,
So,
right?
but you need to be clean, and that was, I mean, a major point of emphasis for this football team throughout the spring and summer. I mean, they talked about the fact that they have this kind of internal grading system that they use for every practice, every walkthrough, every, not meet, not to. I'm not trying to be facetious here, but they grade everything, right? I mean, they're grading, yeah, at lunch, you're seeing the scores and the grades up on the screens. I mean, they're doing all that, and it's this deliberate attempt to really truly be intentional with everything they do. Now, that's kind of a scientific approach of going about this problem that they've had, which is what? Winning in January, right? Breaking through and being the same team on January 15th or January 22nd or whatever it is as they are for the regular season, which the regular season they've been as good, if not the best team in the NFL the last 4 to 5 years at various times. So there's some of that, but I would also argue that some of that is also there's an artistic element to that. There's a psychological, there's a mental element, there's an emotional element to that. That week one's not going to do anything for that, but you want to win. You want to get off on the right foot. You want to feel good about yourselves. And we're going to see how that plays out. I mean, it's a Buffalo team that offensively looks very similar. Not a whole lot of roster turnover with their offense. I believe their entire offensive line is back. Defensively, there has been a little more turnover, but I would also say for as great as Josh Allen was, as great as that offense was, even without having Stephon Diggs, right? I mean, there was so much talk at this time a year ago what they were going to do at wide receiver, but Shakir is a big play guy. Looks like he's going to play after having a high ankle sprain during training camp. I think Keon Coleman is huge for them as far as him taking the next step. But, Josh Allen, much like Lamar Jackson, has this way of dragging his team to the finish line, even if other facets of the roster aren't up to the task. But that Buffalo defense was vulnerable last year. I mean, we saw what happened in week 4, and then we saw what happened in January. And it's not as though the Ravens could not move the ball. They moved the ball very well, but they made mistakes. And Buffalo made some big plays in terms of, obviously Bernard with the forced fumble on Mark Andrews, which was an absolutely massive play that kind of gets forgotten about because of the drop, later on in that fourth quarter. But, I think if you're the Ravens, I mean, you want to come out and do your thing. I don't think you need to deviate from your identity. Although it's silly to say, well, what's the team's identity going to be? I think it's going to be similar to what we've seen here in recent years. But you have that. But then defense, you've got a couple new toys in that defense. I think the secondary is going to have a lot of attention on it because of, as I mentioned, Jair Alexander, and the other one being Malachi Starks, right? I mean, rookie first round pick. He checked every box. They're really happy with where he is, but
But
he's a rookie.
still unproven.
But he's a rookie safety. And and maybe this is where we can transition into the big news of the week with
Yeah,
Kyle
sure.
Hamilton. But with Malachi Starks, Kyle Hamilton just got a $100.4 million contract extension. Well deserved, right? Best player on this defense. I remember what he looked like his first 4, 5, 6 games of his rookie year, and it didn't look great. So that doesn't mean Starks is bound to repeat that, but likelihood is there's going to be a hiccup or two at some point here in this first month, especially considering the opponents that the Ravens have. So what you need to have happen is for those hiccups not to be like the back-breaking play of the game. But this team is loaded, right? I mean, we've talked about it. This roster is as good as anyone in the league. There might be one team that I put ahead of them in terms of just the talent of the roster, maybe the Philadelphia Eagles, and I give the Eagles the tip of the cap because they're the defending champions. But there is no lacking of shortage of talent on either side of the ball. But how does that secondary fare? I love it, but how's it look? For the first time playing together, and of course, the obvious one, Tyler Loop, and what that's going to look like. But I'm really high on this football team. I have been all spring and summer. To your point, couple injuries, but not, I'm not expecting Isaiah Likely. We'll know very quickly. If he's on the practice field this week, he's got some semblance of a chance. If he's not, then he'll officially be ruled out at the end of the week. But I'm not expecting we're going to see him. I'd be surprised, even if he gets out there a day or two on a limited basis. But overall, they're pretty healthy. Buffalo is not. Their first round pick, Hairston, their corner, Hairston, is on IR. So right off the bat, they're a little bit healthier, but we're going to see how it looks. And both these teams want to get off on the right foot because, gosh, we just know how important this game could loom come December and January because of seeding purposes.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like in the golf thing, the playoffs, you get more points for winning the game. This is certainly the Kansas City game become a backdrop for what October and November are going to feel like. And as I've pointed out many times, and like it's my 27th year of doing this. I've been doing this from the beginning every day. So after every game in the history of the franchise, I've spent hours and hours and hours either taking calls, talking about their place in the world, and I can't begin to tell you how many of the years it was catching up. In the beginning, Jacksonville, then Tennessee, always Pittsburgh. And then it wasn't even about those teams. It was about New England forever, for a decade, decade and a half. It was like, didn't matter what you do here. And then there's Denver, and then there's the Colts, and teams that were in the way. Peyton Manning was in the way wherever he was. Tom Brady was in the way. Ben Roethlisberger was in the way. They were all in the way. And I had John McClain on. He's like, Nestor, I'm picking them to win the Super Bowl again. It's the third year in a row. And I'm like, oh no. Don't like if there was a Sports Illustrated cover jinx, if there was a Lamar needs to break through, you all get in the Super Bowl, believe that, believe that. I mean, we're gonna hear that over and over, like for until it happens or doesn't happen, whatever. But it's like there's an immense amount of pressure in a general sense on the expectation of what is or isn't for this team or what it can be. Because when we start to talk about weaknesses, we start to talk about strengths and like where it is, they got Hall of Famers lining up to come to every year. Different Hall of Famer comes to Baltimore to play football to try to win because, like John McClain, they believe they're going to come here and win. This year it's Hopkins, right? Because he couldn't do it in Houston with John McClain and amongst other couldn't do it in Kansas City with Patrick Mahomes last year. So there is this mystique about the Ravens that this is a great place to be and all these players want to be here and they pat themselves on the back and give themselves awards and all of that. But you lose this game. Now we're back into October again at 2-2, wherever we are. Road goes through Buffalo. It'll be cold in Buffalo in January. And the Buffalo thing will be way worse in January this year. You know why? Closing the stadium. Beat the
That's
Bills up
true.
there, you shut their stadium down in January. So you don't want to see them up there. And you
Sure.
don't want to see Cincinnati in the jungle on a Saturday night in January, something, because you lost this kind of game and got behind. Um, what would John say if I were still a media member? Off schedule is what John would say. So, dude, like, and Flacco's coming in, and that's cool in Detroit, and whatever they are, and they might be the best team that nobody's talking about, right? Like personnel, we like this, we like that. Smart people really like Detroit, and everybody likes the coach in Detroit, right? So, and they're the darling. By the way, John, I'm picking the Ravens to play the Lions again. I picked it last year, and I'm like, oh, here we go. Everything that's supposed to happen last year is now supposed to happen this year,
And the year
even though it didn't
before
happen
and the year
last year.
before. Right.
And the
Yeah.
Ravens were as healthy as they've ever been last year. So there is a little bit of a point of, for me, not media guy, not negative guy. Man, I got called up for being negative last week on Baltimore Positive, that I'm not going to be the guy that sits here and says, well, what's going to go wrong? Something's going to go wrong. I don't know what's. It's not going to be the kicker chasing women around. It might be the kicker missing a kick or two. It might be an injury. I don't know, but things go wrong. I mean, you and I right now, it's like, look at the sky here. It's all purple, right? It's kind of got
Yeah.
that Mo Gabba sort of purple orange thing going on, right? And everything's perfect. They're undefeated. Someone's going to get hurt on Sunday night. Someone's going to jump off sides. Someone's going to fumble. Someone might make a big interception and a pick six. Someone might make three big kicks. I don't know, but I do know this, man. Real football comes at you real fast on Sunday night. And the wins and losses in 0-2 last year, they were digging out of it last year with good health. It's just things are going to go wrong, and how you manage that. Literally, it's like real life. My wife had cancer. I had a pregnant girlfriend at 15. I bought a radio station. What's a radio station? Things go wrong in life. It's how they manage that in real time. And to your point, there've been a lot of bullets flying at them in the last 8 months, 9 months. And that's at that speed, at this rate, the way it comes at you loud on Sunday Night Football.
No question. And that's and so much of what you just said applies to Buffalo too, right? I mean, the Bills have been in the same spot. Both these teams. I mean, that's why it's still so funny to me that when you consider what the narrative was going into that Ravens Bills, that Ravens Bills playoff matchup, Allen and Jackson. I mean, the top two MVP candidates. Who's going to be the MVP? All of that. This is a legacy game. And I remember even saying it before that game took place. I was just like, oh, wait a second, guys. I mean, the winner, congratulations. You get to go to Arrowhead and play Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs. I mean, both these teams are, I mean, they're not twin brothers, but the family resemblance is uncanny, right? I mean, it's you can tell that, man, they're so similar in that way. And when it is week one, there's just that unknown, that general unknown that comes with not playing a whole lot in the preseason. And even if you did, I mean, even for the teams, Andy Reid does play his starters a little bit, but it's so little, right? I mean, there's such an unknown about what that's going to look like. But I'm glad you said it, and I've written about it. I've talked about it at probably a half dozen times, in our dozens of conversations we've had in between the end in Orchard Park last January and where we are now, that, there is that health piece that, man, they were so healthy last year. And okay, the bad timing element was what? Zay Flowers getting hurt in week 18. And it just happened to be a 3 or 4 week knee injury at the absolute worst possible time. But beyond that, and they still coulda, shoulda, woulda won that football game if they don't have the self-inflicted mistakes that they had. But now it's like you start over, right? And I think that's the challenge for the Bills, for the Ravens. For any of these teams that have been really good, over time. You think back to the Bills in the 90s, right? I mean,
Or even nouveau riche teams like the one in the burgundy and the gold that just feel in themselves, that feel like, hey, we were good last year.
Yeah,
well,
well,
last year was a long time ago.
think
Everybody's down on the Chargers. Everybody's up on the Broncos. Like, how people feel last year was a long time ago, no matter who you are. And certainly the Chiefs that were just getting by last year,
Yeah.
nobody likes them all of a sudden. It's sort of like, well, they can't do it anymore. I don't know. They ain't never not done it before.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how many dislike them. I think it's just we kind of get fatigued talking. It's honestly, in my mind, the true reason why Lamar didn't win MVP last year was the voters kind of got fatigued with Lamar Jackson, and they thought, all right, it's Josh Allen's time. We've seen that happen with LeBron James in the NBA, Michael Jordan back in the 90s. I mean, you kind of get tired of picking the same guy, so you pick someone else. But to go back to what you just said, I think the difference with Washington or some of those teams, I think it's very easy for those teams to kind of trick themselves to say, oh, hey, we're on the come now. This is awesome. But when you're the Ravens,
like the Orioles the last 2 years.
Sure. But when you're the Ravens and when you're the Bills, you've gone through this multi-year where the regular season is great and you think this is going to be the year, and either you're healthy or like the Ravens 2 years ago, they had home field advantage. Now Buffalo's never had the number one seed. I think that's kind of an interesting element as far as comparing these two teams. But I think once you've gone through that and you've failed a few times in terms of January failure, I think it can be a little intimidating. It can be a little daunting. I think it can be a little bit of a mind, a mind trick or whatever, where it's like week one and you just like, you look at the calendar and you say, man, got a long way to go. We need to, like, our redemption story. They hear guys like us talking and it's just like, wake me in January, right?
Well,
I mean,
the guys like us talking, because we're old guys here. By the way, Luke Jones is here. You can follow him at Baltimore Luke. If you're just listening in on the radio, we appreciate you. You can always throw us a note at Baltimore Positive if you're into the football train here. When you've been doing this long, you realize, let's just say modern era, for anybody that's not as old as me, okay, that goes back to whether Dan Pastorini never got it done and Dan Fouts didn't get it done and Dan Marino never really got it done, but somehow, Jim McMahon did, or whatever, or Trent Dilfer,
yeah.
Whoever, Brad Johnson, right? Go through any of these. The modern era, just in the modern era, in this century, everybody was chasing Brady, and now everybody's chasing Mahomes.
Sure.
So that being the standard, there was the next step down that was Peyton Manning, and his brother beat him to the punch, right? Which was crazy because his brother's not thought of in that way, certainly not when Hall of Fame voting comes around.
I think Eli was the year after. Peyton won in 06 and Eli won in 07.
Yeah. No, but
they beat him to 2 titles.
Eli was like in and out, and Peyton was like When are they going to break? They're choke. Colts can't beat
Right.
Brady. My wife and I attended a couple of those in the snow up in Foxborough back in the day. So, AFC Championship games, playoff games, Roethlisberger, Drew Brees, Philip Rivers. Guys breaking records, doing stuff. Michael Vick was a part of the game at that point and doing special things. So there's all of these other guys, Joe Flacco, obviously, right? All of these other guys, Carson Palmer, that were doing the chasing that were there. Matt Ryan, he should have won one with a 4 touchdown lead, there were all of these quarterbacks there, and the feeling now is, well, at some point, the salary cap, Mahomes, Taylor Swift getting to the tight end, things are going to break down Kansas City. And who's going to be next? Well, Philadelphia's already sat in that seat. And here comes Green Bay making a big trade, making their big thing for defense this week. So we're going to see them Christmas time, too. So I look at all of these quarterbacks, and it's easy to say, well, Josh Allen's got to win one, right? Lamar's got to win one, right? Like, if it's not him, who's it going to be? And I already said everybody's down on the Chargers in here. Burrow's chasing things. And then there's the fan bases where the Clevelands ain't never had it, and the Buffaloes have always wanted it, and the Cincinnatis don't even know what it smells like, and places where there's a pedigree to win. You know what I mean? Like here, it's always like, Harbaugh's already won one. He knows how to do it. DaCosta, they've drafted these guys. They got Hall of Famers on the team. There's a perfect storyline that Derrick Henry would win, and Hopkins and these guys, and the Stanleys and the Marlon Humphreys that were at the locker after so many losses and disappointments, and Mark Andrews gets to kiss the trophy after dropping the ball. Like, there's a storybook to be written here
Sure.
around failure. You know what I mean? And that's for them to figure out. And that's not going to happen on Sunday night. That happens over the hall of seeing the whites in Joe Flacco's eyes when he was accountable, and Billy Cundiff, who didn't get to come back, and John Harbaugh, who did. And a year later, and you were a part of this, a year later, you go up there in the same podium in the same place and say, we came back and we kicked their ass, which Bum Phillips never did for my Allers, which the Eagles and Buddy Ryan never did with Randall Cunningham, which go through the Carson Palmer
Sure.
with Marvin Lewis, go through any number, Matt Ryan and our buddy Mike Smith, right? Like, so there is that point where there's a belief that at some point Allen and Lamar are going to win, and Burrow are going to win Super Bowls. Guess what? That's 3 names right there. 2 of those guys definitely aren't winning. And then you got to throw Mahomes in there and anybody else you want in the AFC and the NFC to say only one gets to win a year, and that's what made it so friggin' hard for Roethlisberger to get, one, and for Drew Brees to get one, to get there and lose one and win one, Kurt Warner, whatever. It's really, really hard to do, man. And like,
Yeah.
when you start to look at this journey of 17 weeks, playoffs, everything having to go perfect, both of these guys think they're going to win the Super Bowl this year. Only one of them can, and the likelihood of that really begins now, because you don't want to be playing these games at Buffalo and Kansas City and Cincinnati. And they also don't want to come to Baltimore. Buffalo got their ass kicked here last year. They don't want to come down here and play in January.
Yeah, and I will say this: the Bengals need to show me they can stop some. Their defense stinks. We'll see, but I'm kind of out on them being mentioned in the same breath as Kansas City, Buffalo, and the Ravens. But that aside, I just wanted to throw that out there because it boggles my mind how they've handled Joe Burrow and their roster building. Anyway, look, it's a journey, and there's this tendency to look at it in terms of like thriving, right? And and I've even said it. You want to win week 1 because of what that means for seeding purposes, right? But we also know things didn't go perfectly for the Ravens in 2012. Far from it. I mean, my goodness, the injuries they had. I mean, Ray Lewis tears his tricep in week 6, and
I wrote a book about it. I know it. It was a hell of a story.
But my point with that is, I mean, it's really about survival as much as anything, right? It really is about handling whatever is thrown your way. I mean, Kansas City was a great example of this 2 years ago, right? In terms of, not that they had this crazy amount of adversity, but they were perceived as being a lesser diminished version of what they had been in previous years. And everyone was writing them off. The idea that, whether it's going to be Buffalo or, okay, they come to Baltimore for the NFC or the AFC Championship game, and they survived, right? They handled it. And I think that's the lesson that the Ravens and the Bills are trying to figure out right now in terms of when you get to those moments. And again, the Ravens have handled everything, other than maybe wanting to get off to a better start last year or, having some issues in previous years in season, but nothing out of the ordinary, excluding the two Lamar injury, back half of the season injury years. But I think for them, it's just, how do you handle things when it goes a little sideways? And, that's what's so disappointing, because you have all the way until January to get to that point, but you also know how much can go wrong. So you just have to take every week for what it is. And I think from a mental standpoint, as hard as it is to do, and you'll hear players and coaches say, "Oh, we're focused on this game." We know that in reality they're not entirely, but it is how they have to approach it. And the teams that can do the best job doing that and just can compartmentalize, they're the ones generally that are going to handle it. I mean, Kansas City just plays so smart in those January moments. I mean, I go back to the 2 years ago against the Ravens. Touchdown drive, touchdown drive. And then what did Patrick Mahomes and that offense do the rest of the game? Basically nothing other than don't screw up, because they kind of knew, all right, we've got the lead. We trust our defense. We don't exactly trust the Ravens to do everything right, because we know they're still chasing. And, the Ravens made their mistakes, and Kansas City just did enough, right? I mean, that's what they did against Buffalo
Oh, these games
year.
always make one play. Right.
Yeah.
I mean,
So,
and despite the blowout last year with these two teams here, I don't expect this to be a 17-point game in the fourth quarter
I mean, I
on
wouldn't think so.
Sunday night, right?
I mean, you never
and
know.
if it's a
but
6-point game, it really becomes about this, we're going to strip Mark Andrews or we're not, or he's going to catch it and go in and beat us. You know what I mean? Like, you're going to make a play. And,
Sure.
yeah.
And I mean, so much of what you mentioned, I mean, and even going over the history of it, it's why everyone loves the NFL. It's so theatrical. I mean, it really is. You have fewer games, right? I mean, we've talked about this, the difference between baseball, which is a nightly marathon, and basketball and hockey are not nightly, but multiple times a week in the
It's an
same
overnight
way.
marathon if you're an Oriole fan this week.
Well, yeah, that Apple TV Friday night game was a doozy. I was asleep in the third inning.
Yeah, I want to.
I did not have. I didn't even watch it because I don't have the subscription.
I'm calling this
But
the yacht rock week. For the
yeah,
Orioles. Late
yeah.
nights and
But with the NFL, it's life or death. No, it's not, right? If the Ravens lose on Sunday night, it's not the end of their season by any stretch. I mean, there's one thing that I won't even utter, but it's the same thing that could happen to Buffalo or Kansas City, right? Something happens to your quarterback. That's the only thing where you say my season's over. There are other things that can happen where you say that's not ideal, but that's the one thing where you say it's over. But it's going to feel like life or death on Sunday night, and it'll feel the same way for Buffalo, because they're going to be saying, "Oh no, what does this mean?" I mean, we're already, kind of looking up at the number one seed and all of that, but it is still a long journey ahead, and
dude, if you want
it's
to play the games in
exciting. I
January,
mean,
you have to win this kind of game. So go
you
win
do.
it. Go
You
win
do.
it.
So
Yeah.
go win it, and I mean, you want to try to optimize your chances, and that's not to say the Ravens can't win on the road in the postseason, because they make two plays that they didn't make against Buffalo in January. We're having a totally different discussion right now. Maybe we're talking about the Ravens going to the Super Bowl and finally breaking through, but they didn't. So it's a moot point. But it starts on Sunday night. I flip a coin. I mean, that's how I feel about these two teams. I think very highly of both teams. I think the Ravens have a better roster 1 through 53, but Buffalo's playing at home. And, we also know it's week one and weird things happen in a general sense in week one. So we're going to see how this goes. But hey, I can't wait. And I'm very much looking forward to having some real substance to talk about instead of these big picture pie in the sky conversations that we've been having for months now. It's time to go play football.
Man, you give me those 2013 references. You had me thinking about like Flacco and Jacoby Jones and like, never giving up and what happens when things go wrong. I mean, down to the last thing. People say, why is Flacco
Yeah.
still playing? I'm like, did you see that play? He just doesn't quit. He just doesn't quit. That's that. I mean, and so
And the
we'll
Browns are really bad.
yeah, we'll see him next week too. So we'll see how bad the Browns are this week and see how your Bengals do. You're down on the Bengals. Maybe Flacco's 1-0 coming in. It'll be differently. All right, we are doing the Maryland Crab Cake Tour on the 16th. Lots and lots of Buffalo conversation this week. Lots of conversations last week from the Maryland Crab Cake Tour. Among what we're doing here, including our GBMC hotline, our new friends at GBMC had Dr. Emily Waters on talking about bariatric and robotics this week. So big appreciation to them. And getting us out on the road for our tastiness too. Our friends at Curio Wellness and Liberty Pure sending me out to eat my favorite foods. People always saying, "Where's the best crab cake? Where do you get this?" People ask me for all sorts of food recommendations on the road. I'm always happy to give them. So we now have a new term for it. It is now tastiness. Tasty, like a tasty cake. Tastiness, NES. Follow along. It's at Baltimore Positive, and you too can have the best donut in the land. It's actually not that far from where Luke lives, too. I am Nestor. He is Luke. Football ahead. They're going to play football on Sunday night for real in Buffalo. And we'll be here to talk about it at Baltimore Positive. Stay with us.